My first job I ever had was working at McDonald's. I got the job when I was a sophomore in high school and had recently turned 16. I lived in a fairly small town that was pretty quiet, but there was a McDonald's and a few other things. We lived in a neighborhood that was pretty close to the McDonald's. In fact, I lived only about a mile away from it. So when I first got the job, I would just walk to and from each shift. It would only take me about 15 minutes roughly to get there and back, and I didn't mind too much. I didn't really like walking back late at night though, because it always felt creepy, but I never really saw anything or had anything strange happen. I was a part-time worker and in high school, so most of my shifts would start in the afternoon and go until sometime at night. When I worked, most of the time I would be behind the counter taking people's orders. And this was before McDonald's had screens in the lobby where you can order at, so you actually had to order at the counter to another person. Most of the time at night, things would be pretty quiet, especially when it got to be later. One night I worked until like 9 or 10 p.m. When I got off work, as typical, I punched out and then left to walk home. I remember this night I got off the McDonald's property and began walking along the sidewalk. This went along the road that was kind of quiet. At night there would be hardly any cars, but during the morning or late afternoon it would get sort of busy. About 2 or 3 minutes into the walk on that sidewalk, I heard footsteps behind me. I don't think I had ever encountered anybody else out walking in my times going home to that point. It immediately made me a little nervous, but I told myself that it was nothing. As I kept walking, I was hearing footsteps behind me the whole time. They were kind of a long ways back and seemed to be staying at about the same distance. Eventually, after maybe 5 more minutes, I had to turn right at that street and now go to a quieter one. In fact, this road did not even have a sidewalk on it, so I would just walk on it close to the curb. After a little while, I realized that the person behind me turned as well. At that point, I looked behind to see who it was. There was a man there, and I got a pretty good look at him. He seemed to be a little bit closer than before. It made me nervous because why would he turn at the same spot that I did? To make it home, I had to walk down this street, then take another left, walk for about 5 minutes, and then take a right to my street. After walking the rest of the way down that area, the man remained about the same distance back. When I turned, I looked at him again. He looked at me this time, but didn't say or do anything. I was pretty nervous now because he once more appeared to be slightly closer. I walked down that street, which did have a sidewalk, and the man turned there as well. Whether he was intentionally following me or not, I didn't know 100%, but what I did know is that I just wanted to get away from him. So long before my street, I turned and went down a random one. I started walking really fast as well. Without really giving it much thought, I just turned and walked into a driveway right away. The man had not made it around the corner yet. Then I went around the garage to that property and into the backyard. Most of the houses had a lot of trees in the backyard, as this area had lots of trees in general, so I was able to get out of the man's sight pretty well. I didn't stop around to see if he would come after me. Instead, I just cut through a few people's backyards and then went around a house and into the street on the other side. After that, I walked down that street and no longer saw the man. I very carefully walked the rest of the way back home, taking a different route. Thankfully, I made it back and did not see the man. I didn't know for certain if he had been following me or not, but it sure seemed like he was. I felt lucky to have made it back safely. By the next day, though, I had sort of forgot about it. A few days later, I was working another night shift again at McDonald's, with similar hours to before. I was behind the counter, and after a long time of working again, it got to be later and later at night. I remember that when it got to be about an hour left in my shift, the restaurant had no customers in it at all. Then the door opened, and I looked over and saw a man walking in. I instantly recognized him. It was the same man who had followed me home the other night. I was shocked. He casually walked up to the counter and then looked up at the menu. I was nervous and didn't know what to do. The man then proceeded to order as normal. I just took his order and kept it professional. I didn't ask him if he had followed me or anything like that. Being young, I didn't really know how to handle a situation like that, and maybe, just maybe, he happened to live in the same neighborhood as me and walked to McDonald's. So he stood around and waited, and soon his food was up. I gave it to him, and he walked over and sat down by himself in one of the booths. He was sitting kind of in the back corner of the restaurant, but he was facing me. Overall, he had been pretty quiet, didn't say too much, and was overall polite. As I stood there by the counter, the man sat there in the corner and slowly was eating. Eventually, someone else came in and ordered, but when they got their food, they left. They didn't stick around to eat. A while after that, we got another customer, but they too left. I was getting off work soon, but the McDonald's would still be open for a few more hours later. The man was still sitting in the corner, now done eating. He didn't leave though, he just continued to sit there. I started to wonder if he was waiting for me to leave and then was going to follow me again. As it got to be a few minutes from when I would clock out, I didn't know what I should do. My parents' only car was being used because my dad worked a lot of late nights. I wanted to ask one of my coworkers for a ride home, but nobody else got off at around the same time I did, so my only way of getting home was walking. I decided to just leave and hope for the best. When I finally got off, the man was still just sitting there in the corner by himself. I went and clocked out and then left the McDonald's. When I walked out the doors, I looked over and the man was still sitting there. It seemed as though possibly he was going to just keep sitting in the McDonald's. It was another very quiet night outside. I started walking down the sidewalk and thought that I was in the clear. However, within a minute, I heard the McDonald's door opening off in the distance. I looked back right away, and there he was, the same guy. I started walking really fast, and I was sure that he was following me. Now, to my left was the road, and to my right was this woods. On the other side of it, a ways back, was another neighborhood that connected to ours. It was like a 5-minute walk to get past the woods, and then turn right at that road without the sidewalk that I mentioned before. So, as I walked, the man's footsteps were moving sorta quick as well, and although he was a ways back, I knew that if he wanted to, he could catch up to me. I was a small 16-year-old girl, and this guy was like 6 feet tall. So I turned and decided to go into the woods. I just went right through the trees, and then started making my way through the tall grass, bushes, and tree branches. It was a very dense woods, and I could hardly see anything anymore. I walked into the woods a good ways, maybe like 20 or 30 feet, and then I stopped. The man no doubt heard me, and saw me go into the woods as well. I hid behind a tree, and looked out towards the sidewalk to see if the man would walk past. I could not really see to the sidewalk at all, just barely sort of. At first, I didn't hear anything, but I was sorta deep in the woods, so I couldn't hear much as well. Then, within a few seconds, I did hear the man walk to the area where I was, and then he stopped. Moments later, I heard him start to enter the woods. This really freaked me out. I turned and took off running. I ran the opposite way from where the man was, going as fast as I could. It seemed to get thicker and thicker in the woods with so many tree branches and stuff. After a while of running, I stopped and slowed down. I saw this huge bush, and I laid down and hid myself under it. I could hear the man walking off in the distance, but didn't know exactly where he was. I heard leaves being kicked around, and the man moving around. He was definitely looking for me. Still, he didn't say anything. Neither of us did. The man got closer, and I almost got up and took off running again, but I didn't. He then turned and went in another direction. After a few more minutes of hearing him walk around, he didn't get that close to me. He seemed to go off in another way. When I was no longer able to hear him, I got up and then ran to the left. This was the opposite direction of where the man had gone, and also the general direction of my house. I knew that this woods would connect with the neighborhood. I ran and ran through there and then finally made it out. I was covered in leaves and scratches from the tree branches, but overall I was alright. At that point, I jogged the rest of the way back home, looking over my shoulder every 2 seconds. Thankfully, I made it back. This time, I told my mom right away, and she called the cops. They ended up going to the McDonald's and looking around and searching the woods too, but unfortunately, the man was gone. I'm not sure where he went, but he got away from there. When I worked from that point on, I always got a ride. One of our neighbors drove me and picked me up when my parents couldn't, because it was such a short drive for them. That was nice of them, and it may have saved me from getting followed again. Although I never saw that man in the McDonald's for the rest of the time that I worked there. He never came back to my knowledge, and I'm guessing that's because he knew that I knew he was following me after I ran into the woods. He probably figured out that I reported him, which was true. I'm mad that he didn't get caught for that. I worked at that McDonald's for a few more months and then got another job. That was by far the scariest thing to happen in my time there.